so much to talk about. We have a lot of videos too as well. And
show's getting better and better, everybody. It's crazy.
And you know what else is getting better?
What's that?
You know what else is getting better is these images that are being created for our shows.
The great Kate.
And we are going to talk about the great reopening debate. There's been a lot of stuff in the news about that lately.
All right, so here we go. Welcome, everybody, to Random Assignment. That man on the left of your screen, it's Corey DeAngelis. You've seen him on Twitter. You've seen him on the web, radio interviews, television interviews, quoted, newspaper stories. Oh, my goodness, he is ubiquitous. And here he is on our show. Corey, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well. I think you're pumping me up too much, man. I feel like the listeners might hear that and then they say, "Oh man, this Corey guy, he doesn't actually know what he's talking about." You got to set your expectations low so you're never disappointed.
This is what in television they'll call a tease. Next week's show, whoever tunes in, I will begin by insulting Corey just to balance what I've done on this program. My name is Bob Bowden. I'm with Choice Media. Corey's with Reason Foundation. Choice Media. Pardon?
Boom, there we go.
There we go. And I just want to say a quick shout out to the people years from now who are watching this video as a time capsule of the strangest year ever in American education. And I want to say to all of you future people, I'm mainly jealous for your personal flight machines, your hovercraft things, or what do you call those, Corey? The way they can fly around, you know, like, you know what I'm talking about?
Hovercraft?
It's like a...
Jetpack.
A jetpack. That's what you're talking about. Yeah. So anyway,
Elon Musk, he made one of those, right?
Yeah. If you future people have conquered time travel, I wouldn't mind a jetpack. That's all I'm trying to say. But let's get to it, Corey. We have a massive week, and the biggest. I mean, it was very easy to pick the episode title of this particular program, which there have a cameo appearance of the graphic, but indeed it has returned, the great reopening debate, because this has dominated conversations. Oh my goodness, with Betsy DeVos going on television over and over, and President Trump talking about it more, and the teachers unions leaders talking about it, and governors talking about it, and op-eds everywhere. I mean, it was a massive week for everyone weighing in on the question of when and how to reopen schools.
Yeah, I mean, there's been this huge war between teachers unions essentially on one side and a lot of conservatives, Donald Trump included, Betsy DeVos included, on the other side. One side saying, hey, we need to reopen the schools, we're paying for it, and we're not getting any of the services, and they kind of have a point. Then you have the other side saying, oh, no, we really want to reopen schools, but we just need to throw more and more money into the system. We got to spend $116 billion more if we want to reopen in the schools. Got to give us more money, even though you already gave us $13.3 billion that we haven't even spent yet. We want 116.5 or something more if we're going to reopen it. So This is the great reopening debate. And you said, we talked to our future listeners that would look back on this day and say this is one of the craziest weeks and one of the craziest years for education reform. This might be the year that sparks more interest in school choice, though, because I think families are seeing this and saying this is a bunch of BS. Families aren't even in the conversation right now. We're feeling left out, and the money should follow our kids. And we'll get to some stories on that in a second. But here's Betsy DeVos. She actually had two interviews just the other day, one on CNN, and then one about an hour later, she showed up on Fox News talking about this reopening and her stance. Here's the clip.
The general rule should be that schools should be fully operational and fully open in the fall. What does that mean when you talk about fully open? Does that mean in person 5 days a week?
Well, Chris, we know that for kids getting back to school and getting back to learning, getting back with their peers, with their teachers is really imperative. And fully operational and fully functioning means that kids can be back there. And if for families that need their kids in school in person 5 days a week, that has to be an option. But so the point needs to be, how do kids get back to learning in the fall full time, and how do we ensure that they get a full year plus of learning? They've fallen behind this spring. We need to ensure they're back in a classroom situation wherever possible and whenever possible, and fully functioning, fully learning.
Now, Corey, in my opinion, Betsy made a slight strategic error in the way she presented that idea. that what she should have said is, we're the federal government. We don't run schools. It's up to you, states and districts, to make decisions about this. We believe we should encourage generally schools to reopen. But what we are clear on is if you choose to not reopen, you should not receive federal funds from taxpayers who are paying you to not run schools. In other words, as we mentioned last week, all kinds of costs are lower if you don't open the brick and mortar version of the school, even if the teachers are online. You don't have to pay for cafeteria food and cafeteria workers and janitors and all kinds of other expenses that disappear if you do online learning, even though there are still expenses when you're doing online learning. So what happened is a lot of people pushed back on her and said, oh, so you're contradicting yourself, Secretary DeVos. You used to say that the federal government shouldn't dictate top-down what schools and states should do. Now you're doing just that. So what do you say to that, Corey?
Well, and she also pivoted, and let me pull up my tweet, because I think this might have been left out of that, unless I just didn't catch it in that clip. But she also pointed out that she wanted, that what she meant was she wants the funds to follow students. Here's the quote that I pulled from the other day. She said, if schools aren't going to reopen, they shouldn't get the funds. Give it to the families to decide. So she's not saying, that the federal government's going to come top down and say you don't get any money at all if you don't reopening. She's just saying we can still fund education, just have it go to the families. And if the families still want to, allocate their dollars to the government schools that are providing a remote learning situation, I think that's good. That would be
I don't know about you, Corey. I did not find that messaging consistent throughout the week. The part about going directly to the parents seemed to be, it kind of came and went like a firefly in the night or something. And so that would have been different if she had been consistent about that. She kind of was saying, yes, you should open. I'm going to tell you top down to open, unless it's a flare up. She did make that exception on almost every interview, if not every interview. But anyway, but then go ahead.
I think the only explanation is that she, must have read this at some point after those first interviews and then changed her game a little bit. This guy, Corey DeAngelis from the Reason Foundation, his take is don't force schools to reopen, but don't force families to pay for closed schools either. So I think she's kind of pivoted to that. It doesn't mean that she read my article or anything, but she did say that in that recent Fox News interview where she said kind of, let the families decide. And the way I take that is, if your school's not going to reopen, have the money follow the child. And, I think that's the best way to do it, because I don't want the federal government, making top-down mandates. And I don't like federal government intrusion very much at all. I just would like the families to be able to choose, where to take those dollars. If the schools aren't serving their kids, well, they shouldn't have to pay for them. They should be able to take the money elsewhere.
Well, let's point out some of the blistering attacks she got. You have the Washington Post. Yeah, you have the Washington Post link up. Yeah,
she got a lot of pushback on this, and she was actually trending that day when she did the 2 interviews. She was trending on Twitter, and people were saying that, oh, you just want children to die. Betsy DeVos wants children to die. You got this in the Washington Post. I wouldn't trust you to care for a houseplant. Yes. Democrats blast DeVos for insisting schools fully reopen. So,
right. And we'll have more clips actually a little bit later, where the union presidents are trashing DeVos and saying you should just ignore her. She doesn't know anything. But then what I thought was interesting is that she did something that I do think was clever, which when she retweeted an NBC Nightly News story citing 5 pediatricians who said the benefits of being in school far outweigh the risks for students. All 5. Secretary DeVos tweeted that all 5 of those interviewed by who? Right-wing zealots? No, NBC Nightly News. All 5 of the people they interviewed said, yeah, they're going to send their kids back to school in the fall. So, I thought it was actually kind of a clever rejoinder. And yeah, the link is below there in the tweet. So that happened too. That part I thought was kind of, I don't know, to some degree hoisting them on their own petard with respect to both the mainstream media and this kind of follow the experts narrative, which we hear all too often, and I've railed about to some degree in the past before. But then Lily Eskelsen Garcia, the head of the NEA, which I learned actually just today, is not only the largest teachers union, which we say all the time, it's the largest union in the United States, NEA. The president of that union, Mrs. Skelton Garcia, went on to say that parents and teachers should ignore Trump and ignore DeVos.
Let's check it out.
So I can't say this enough. Just ignore everything Donald Trump is saying and Betsy DeVos. They don't know what they're talking about, or they're making empty threats, and they do know they're empty threats. They are not our boss, and they have not figured that out. So just ignore that. We're not under threat of losing our money for our students, but we are under threat of a pandemic and people dying if we don't do this safely. Parents are not going to want to sacrifice their children, and teachers are not going to want to be complicit in opening an unsafe school that is going to endanger the entire community. So we don't have to choose that. We can actually choose to do it right. And that's what we're hoping for.
Lily, what are your members saying in terms of children's mental health and social development right now? Because as much as everybody would like transmission rates to be at 0 before kids go back to school, there is a cost to them not going back to school as well.
Right. We don't believe that there should be a trade-off between a child's mental health, their physical health, and their academic needs. We're going to have to do something that serves that whole child the same way they did in Denmark, Germany, and Australia, and other places that took this very seriously from the beginning. And so, and it is why distancing and having the protective gear is so important to even think about opening the school. And no one said 0 infection rate. We said 2 weeks. This is the CDC, 2 weeks of constant decline, so that you know that what you're trying is actually working and the infection rate is much lower in your community. And when that blessed day occurs, we want to be ready with something that does meet the needs of our students, their mental health, physical health, and their academic health. Don't let anyone tell you that you have to sacrifice one to get the other.
She creeps me out so bad. It's the second week in a row I've said that, but there's something about her style. When she did that Biden introduction last week, and she had that weird breathy introduction style here where she's saying, like, nobody ever said we did anything like that. We just want wonderful things for all kids and $116 billion. And like, there's something just palpably inauthentic to me. But first of all, I want to personally, I'm getting very excited right now, Corey. I'm sorry to monopolize for a second, but that Bloomberg anchor for bringing up 0 transmissions, thank you. I want to publicly thank that woman for asking that question, because the answer it elicited was, we just want 14 days of constant lowered infection rate. And a couple answers to that could have been, oh, so let's say you're in a county with 50,000 people and the infection rate goes from 2 people to 3 people, but it's not lowered. Does that mean you've got to keep schools closed until the metric is lowered? Like, it's an absurd sort of way to say it. And then, and so anyway, I mean,
the best response she could have had, Lily could have had, was, well, there's abuse that happens in schools too, and there's mental health and bullying issues that go on in schools too. But she didn't say that because,
well, she's not going to say that.
She's not going to say that about her school system,
right?
I mean,
the other thing I wanted to say,
that's the logical argument to make if you're gonna go down that road. But this is, I mean, it's complicated. That's why I think the money just needs to go to the families, and we shouldn't have any top-down rules. I don't care if the school reopens or not, as long as the money goes to the families. Like, if my neighborhood Walmart doesn't reopen, I don't care all that much about that, because I can take my money elsewhere. I can take it to another Walmart that's a little bit further away.
But they're not going to overnight implement a national voucher type, ESA type program. I mean, I think that would be pretty logistically difficult in a month or something. Believe me, I support it as much as you do, but I'm just talking about, the real politique here. I mean, one thing, she started out by saying, Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos, they're not our boss. Guess who's also not our boss? You, Lily. You're not our boss. You're not the boss of school districts, and you're not the boss of parents. So this whole not a boss thing goes both ways, Lily, with you and your creepy presentation. And
well, yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because it's either Trump saying all schools should reopen, or it's Lilly and her side saying that, oh no, we're not going to provide you with any educational services at all unless you, the taxpayers, pay us twice as much of federal funding as you did in the previous, or 3 times the amount, because 116 billion is twice the amount of the most recent school year. So that'd be tripling federal funding.
And you made a point when we were off before air about how in a different interview she'd asked for money. Well, we need money. We need this 116 billion, whatever the number is. We need more money for always, right? Always more money. And she gave an example of like, how come this is okay for private industry to get money? You know, where is our additional money? And the fact is, they already got additional money. So they want a second round of free additional COVID money. I mean, I say free, but whatever you want to call it, additional COVID money. They already got one round of it, just like private industry did. So to allege or present it as if private industry got a cash full of dough that the schools didn't get is, what do you want to call it? Disingenuous?
The states haven't even spent it yet. The most recent number I've seen, and the highest number I've seen, is about 1.5 to 2% of that $13.3 billion that have already been allocated to states have actually been spent. And so, like, you're not even spending the money you already got. And federal funding can be extremely complicated. Maybe that's one of the reasons for this. Why should we expect it to be any different when we pour tons of over $100 billion to the schools this time? And then, yeah, it's interesting that, and I know I'm skipping around a bit, but I guess we'll talk about this a little later, but the 74 reported that the teachers unions actually already dipped into the small business protection loans.
So some of your best material, Corey, is when you skip around, by the way. The viewers love it. I wanted to say just quickly other things. One is she says, well, we need 14 days of lowered whatever. So Betsy DeVos also said that if there were flare-ups of the virus, that would be a different case. She wants schools reopened in places where there aren't flare-ups of the virus. And so you have both women saying in cases of lots and lots of virus, we would probably not want to urge reopening. Both women are saying in cases of extremely low virus, we would want to reopen. So now really what's happening is both are just debating what sort of epidemiological infection rate seems to be their threshold. And neither of them are epidemiologists, obviously. So I would have liked the anchor to have followed up with something like that to say, like, well, really, like, you're actually sounds like you're saying the same thing as Betsy DeVos, that both sides say there should be varied policies based on the level of infection. And then one last thing, she said the thing about, we want to do what Denmark has done, and in that creepy way, and Germany,
reopened, right?
Yeah, like, so I just decided, hey, I wonder what Germany is doing. So if you wouldn't mind just pulling up that link, that link on the npr.org, there you go. What's happening in Germany? Look at that. Lessons from Germany, Israel, and Thailand. Well, she mentioned Germany. It was the largest country she mentioned. So if you just scroll down a little bit, what you'll find out is, oh my gosh, it almost looks like Betsy DeVos's plan. So the woman from Germany interviewed here is, let's see now, I'm getting a little confused. I think it might be Nicholson. Yeah. So Nicholson says, a
lot of stuff.
Yeah, but scroll back up. Scroll a little higher. I think you passed it. The main thing. Yeah, Germany's education differs from state to state. That's a DeVos, plan, right? But in most of Germany, students have been back at school since May, albeit on a part-time basis, and this allows for reduced class sizes. But then look a little bit lower in that same paragraph. It says, even in Berlin's city education authorities announced it doesn't expect students to follow social distancing rules as of the new school year. So they're going to stop social distancing, and because the younger students are going to ignore them anyway. And it also says by next fall, they're just going to go ahead and open up in their normal way. So she gives an example of Germany. And what we see is Germany seems to be absolutely committed to reopening while allowing for differences in different states, which is what DeVos says also. So
and didn't Sweden keep their schools open pretty much the whole time or barely?
Sweden is the world's example of let's try to do the herd immunity thing and kind of keep going. And some people say, oh, its death rate is higher than Norway. That's why it's a disaster. Other people say Sweden's death rate is far below some other countries who closed down completely. So do you want to declare Sweden to be a success story or a failure? Depends kind of on your point of view. But
Well, let's talk about what DeVos's plan would actually look like when she says, have the money follow the student and let the families decide. What do you take from that? I think she's hinting at the potential federal proposal of getting it into the next stimulus bill, which we talked about last week. That they were talking, Trump was talking about maybe having 10% of the K through 12 education funding be allocated to students through some type of school choice mechanism instead of to the system.
Pete, when Lilia Skelton-Garcia goes on TV and says, just ignore Donald Trump, just ignore Betsy DeVos, they have no idea what they're talking about, or they're bluffing and they can't back it up. When she says stuff like that, it makes what you said a lot more likely, I think, that Trump will go, oh, okay, let's see if you can ignore this. And people would lose their minds, don't you think, in the traditional...
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the only way that they can really do it is right, you get it through that stimulus bill, or you do something through Congress. I'm sure you can think of other ways that Trump could kind of, I would argue, overstep his...
Like executive order it. You're trying to say DACA style. Like an Obama DACA thing. Yeah.
I think that would be a little too much.
All right, let's just pound through these quickly.
States can do it too. States can do it too, and we've seen other states proposing some stuff, which we'll talk about.
So on this great reopening debate, a whole bunch of districts have announced virtual-only schools in the fall. This seems to be, it's happening like every time you log in. There's another district or superintendent saying this. 2 Phoenix area school superintendents. I don't think this is Phoenix itself, but there you have that one. Let's just pop through these quickly. We can just see the sheer number of them. Atlanta Public Schools, no face-to-face, virtual only. Here are a couple of Texas superintendents saying, look at that. They're advocating online only anyway. But then there's other ones. LA Unified has said, no way, we are going virtual only, at least at the beginning of the fall.
Wasn't it Los Angeles and I don't remember. It was San Diego schools as well.
Yes, it was.
I just saw an update from Sacramento schools are doing.
Should be doing it too. Now, some districts are saying it's too early to tell. That's what the Las Vegas superintendent right there says. He says he's going to need a crystal ball to find out the school restart plan. And so maybe our future world listeners can help with the crystal ball part. But I was a superintendent, I think that would be closest to my soundbite for the press. I don't know about you, Corey. I'd be like, yeah, well, maybe can you give me a few weeks?
I don't know what the heck. And by the way, why not just give it to the families and let the districts decide whether they want to reopen or not?
Yeah. And then we also have all kinds of unions raising all kinds of hell. I mean,
not interested.
And we're not interested. Maybe
they're
later.
always trying to get me to sign up. There's always all these ads. But Chicago teachers unions has demands.
Oh, of course they do, because they're the bosses of the school. It's going to work great if the unions run the school, just the way the AFT started their own charter school in New York and it failed. But anyway, keep going. So a lot of these union stories, Houston one, look at that. Houston schools. No way, shape, or form. The unions warn. Okay, well, I guess we should just listen to them. They're in charge, right? We have this one from St. Louis Public Schools. It says very quickly talking about school buildings that look a lot like prisons.
They already did.
Right. And they want a voice. The teachers union wants a voice in the St. Louis reopening plan, that says. Moving on next, this is California teachers. Okay, I guess this is statewide fighting back against pressure to reopen schools, because we are the teachers. And, I think there's a couple more we could just hit quickly. People are... Ohio Teachers Union, callous and clueless, right? And I think we got one or two more. There's the LA, we talked about that, but the Teachers Union, they're already on that one. And then, there's new Teachers Union group. I forgot where that is. And there, I'm scared in Detroit, a city hit hard. So that's school leaders agonizing. And here's something I wanted to ask you, Corey, because this happened like over the weekend. I was talking with someone and they said, who's considered essential workers and having to go to work every day?
Liquor stores.
People who work at McDonald's, people who work at the drugstore, people who work at the supermarket, people who work at the doctor's office, people who work at the gas station, people who work in all kinds of the 7-Elevens, the local convenience stores. There are countless organizations. Now you generally have to wear masks and you take some precautions, but they're considered essential workers. All of these people, the idea that a teacher is less essential than a McDonald's clerk is, to me, kind of crazy sounding, isn't it? Like, why are the? Go ahead. What is your sense of that? What is essential? What is logical? What would make sense in this era?
I think it's all essential, right? It depends on the individual's needs, and the problem is when you can just use your power dynamic and say, you know, I just can't go back to work, and you know you're still going to get paid. I'm not saying that everyone's making this up, and I'm not saying that these people are, you know, that they're bad people or anything, but that's just kind of a different power dynamic that you see with when you have the customer on the hook, right? When the families don't have any other exit option and you still get to keep their money, your incentive is to say, oh, well, you know, maybe I don't really want to teach as much.
The kids get this way less than adults. The risk is way lower for children. And there's lots of new studies showing that the asymptomatic cases don't transmit the virus. If you look at the other countries around the world, they say they are not seeing transmission from when they have reopened schools, as Germany has done. They are not seeing increases from those. So why is it that this one industry is the one where the employees get to tell us that they are non-essential and therefore they don't have to work, but all these other walks of American life?
I wouldn't have any problem with that if they didn't want to go to work, if we didn't have to pay for them, and if our children could get some other type of education elsewhere. Like I said earlier, if my nearest grocery store doesn't open, I don't give a crap. It might be inconvenient, but at least I could take my money elsewhere and they don't get to keep taking my money from me. Right. And with me not getting any of the products. Okay. That's why it's completely different.
Let's roll quickly. We got a big show, but there was a guy, you found a Steve Hilton, who spoke about this reopening issue on a Sunday night Fox News show. And he had an interesting
Jordan Sekulow from ACLJ, where families are starting to look at this and feel left out of the equation. They're saying, screw this, you know, we're not even part of the conversation. And here's his take on it.
If your child's school won't open this fall, demand your money back so you can find an alternative. It's your child, it's your tax dollars. Why should you pay for a service you're not getting?
Yeah.
Makes too much sense.
There you go.
And
there you go. He's been reading Corey DeAngelis. Man like
exactly.
that.
Yeah. Well, he needs to but yeah, he had Jordan Sekulow on the show, and Jordan followed up and said, yeah, contact us at ACLJ, and we'll we might be able to represent you, because a lot of state constitutions say that the state needs to provide some type of school system that provides an adequate or effective or efficient or thorough education. Depends on the state that you're living in, but that's the words that are used. And perhaps the families could go and make a case. But also, so we might as well point out, this was later in the show notes, but check this out, that families actually took their offer up at ACLJ, and you have this mother that lives in North Carolina. She said, I just filed to get my school voucher money sent directly to me from the county, since North Carolina is not resuming school as normal and the proposed school plan is not going to work for us.
Of course, she lives in a state, North Carolina, that has school vouchers, and most people do not. So there is that. But anyway, it's still kind of cool to say that she's suing to get voucher money.
She's demanding her money back, as Steve Hilton would say.
All right.
But it makes sense, right? If you're not getting the product, why should you have to pay for it?
Yeah, it's like what are they paying for random assignment for access to this content, Corey? What are we charging for this show?
Oh, this is priceless, man. You can't put a price tag on this.
All right. So there was a thing. So turning to politics, so I guess a different form of politics. There was something released called the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force Recommendations Combating the Climate Crisis and pursuing environmental justice. That was the title. Can you pull up the Politico link, Corey?
I have the documents, 110 pages.
Now look at that. Now it's 110 pages. Now look at the subtitle, just so you guys don't think I'm lying about this. This is about the climate crisis and environmental justice. All right, I just want to be clear on the purpose of this document. Well, it turns out that they have a section all about charter schools. Look at that. You found it that fast. Yeah, amazing how search works.
Schools, we got to regulate them. We got to allow the school districts to...
Well, on account of the climate, Corey. So the climate will be better if we limit charter schools. So...
Oh, and by the way, we got to get rid of that private school voucher program that serves 95% Black or Hispanic students in the District of Columbia, coming from an average household income of $26,440. Come on.
Yeah, type charter. I think it'd probably get there faster.
Yeah, I can't. It's in there, but trust me, it's in there. It's under the SOAR Act, which is the DC Opportunity Scholarship. This private schools discontinue funding of the scholarships, the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program. This voucher program authorizes diversion of $20 million annually to private schools. No, it diverts the families, the money to the families, which are overwhelmingly, low-income families. Average household income $26,000 in the District of Columbia.
Yeah.
Corey,
why are you attacking the environment like this? This is to help the environment. These proposals. Now, there's also a section on charter schools, though. It's a different section where they say we're against for-profit charter schools and stuff like that. There it is right there.
And for-profit charter.
There you go. So this isn't the actual Joe Biden for president.com or whatever it is, joebiden.com. It's not the actual. This is what's called the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force. So this is a bunch of people that sit around and say, well, this is what. If you want to unite the Bernie bros into the Joe Biden movement, let's have some kind of joint policy kind of confab or whatever and come together. So it's not Joe Biden himself. It is some of his people.
They agreed to get it put together, right? Biden and
obviously it's his people, is his name on it, part of it. But so after all this, what did we have? Oh my goodness. Donald Trump went to the Rose Garden in the White House and decided to start talking about some of these things that Corey just read to you.
Yep, check it out.
Here's a bad one, really bad one. End school choice. There is nothing that the African American community wants more than school choice. And mothers and fathers are going to be very happy to see him be defeated just on that alone, end school choice. So Joe Biden wants to end school choice, end tax credit scholarships serving disadvantaged students in 26 states, oppose 14 million Americans with education savings accounts, and get rid of school choice, having to do with school choice. Eliminate school choice in Washington, D.C. You know what they've done in Washington. They have some incredible example. Right here, example. I know of one example. I think they have a number of them, but one is incredible. Abolish all charter schools. Charter schools are doing great. Ban funding for charter schools in poor neighborhoods. We don't want charter schools in poor neighborhoods. Well, that's not fair. Abolish educational standards.
Okay, so the funny thing to me is that the document didn't exactly say abolish all charter schools, but what it kind of might do, interested in your thought on this, Corey, is kind of scare out the Biden campaign to make them clarify, because there's that clip that we run all the time of Biden saying this DeVos notion of charter schools is going to go away, and so many find that to be vague and ambiguous. What exactly does that go away? What does that mean? All charter schools, or just the DeVos notion of charter schools?
Are you talking about this clip, Bob?
And so the point is, if I'm president, Betsy DeVos's whole notion from charter schools to this are gone.
I am. Please pardon the excessive promotion. Anyway, the point is that I don't know. What did you think about this when when Trump came
well, he gets the sentiment right that Biden, this task force 110-page document did say a lot of things that would restrict access to charter schools, and it does say to ban for-profit charter schools, which are only like 11-12% of all charter schools. So the sentiment is right, but this is one of the clips of Trump that I didn't share on my Twitter page because it wasn't actually 100% factually accurate if you look at the exact things he was saying. But from a political standpoint, I think you're right that if Biden wants to come out and say, "Oh no, we're not against charter schools," that could be a good political move for Trump to get him. Now the burden of proof is kind of on Biden to say, "Look, when I said the whole." Can you? 1 second, my
what's something happening? Somebody's Skyping Corey.
Yeah, someone's hacking me. No, remember how I told you I was on an earlier radio interview and these ads started popping up? I have all these,
okay,
the tabs to pull up for our show. I just exited them all out because I couldn't find the right one. But one of them started playing an ad. Of course it did, and it was right in my ears. But yeah, so I think that's why he's doing that. And then I also want to point
clearly
out,
you and I could have written a little bit tighter copy for the president on that subject matter. Not that we are,
and I want to point out that he also here. I'll just bring up the Politico thing again because I don't remember the exact wording on that. Sorry, I had to exit out of everything because of the dang ads. They're so obsessed with running ads on these dang websites that I don't want to see. But I guess that's how you pay for these things, right? Through ads. It's just getting a little excessive. But check it out. They said something along the lines that the districts are going to, the federal funding for charter schools be conditioned on the local school districts.
I saw that.
Require that federal funding for charter schools in any district be conditioned on the district's review of the financial or academic impact of a charter or a charter school that wants to expand in that district or neighborhood. So that's kind of like me being McDonald's saying, well, you know what? We reviewed your plan, Burger King, and it just doesn't seem like it's high quality, and we don't want any of our customers to go over to Burger King, so we're going to say you don't get any of their money.
Yeah, there's another provision. Totally another provision like that. They say in their document, will call for conditioning federal funds on expanding charter schools on a district's review of whether the charter will systematically underserve the neediest students.
Oh, I didn't.
So, yes. So in other words, if you're in New Orleans, where you serve all students, there you go, systematically underserve the neediest students. The charter would have to systematically only target the neediest students. So if you're in a place like New Orleans, where all students go to charter schools, this document would say, forget your federal help in that regard. So you are going to only, if a charter school wants to help all students in a certain district, in a certain town, in a certain, city. Sorry, they say the Biden-Sanders task force people say, sorry, you're not targeting the neediest students.
Yeah, how do you define that? And then look, whatever charter schools get, this should be matched with an investment in what they call community schools. They're talking about government-run schools. They're not community schools. The whole community doesn't have access to these schools because of residential barriers.
Right.
But look, they're saying whatever funding charter schools you get be matched with an investment in their quote unquote community schools.
It's funny, they don't say just equal investment in both categories of schools, do they? They just say if there's anything one side gets, we keep. If our side gets to keep what we get, but if their side gets something, we get that too. Anyway, so let's move on. You found this thing about Pennsylvania and the legislators proposing giving education dollars directly to families.
This is pretty interesting. It moved pretty quickly on Twitter yesterday. I'm pulling it up right now because of that thing that popped up earlier. But let me share my screen again with you.
Well, I can just talk while you pull it up. It's called the Back on Track legislation. There you go.
Back on Track legislation. It's essentially an education savings account that Pennsylvania legislators put together, and they introduced it to the legislature yesterday. But it would be it's based on the CARES Act funding that has already been allocated from the federal government to Pennsylvania. It's sitting in a restricted fund right now, just sitting there. And this bill would allow $500 million of those dollars to be used for education savings accounts to what they say would help families get back on track. So if you're a current homeschooler, you could use it. If you're a private school, if you want to use it for private school tuition, you could use it. If you're at a public school and you're still enrolled in the public school and they're not providing adequate, education, you can use that funding and still be enrolled in the public school to use for tutoring or other types of online services as well, to help these families get back on track. And I will say it's only $1,000.
Only $1,000, yeah, for each.
It's for 500,000 scholarships, so 500,000 students. It's a low scholarship amount, but if you look at their other private school choice programs in Pennsylvania, I think they're similarly underfunded, where it's about, I think $1,800 or $2,000 per scholarship, around that amount. So, but this is a step in the right direction. I would argue that if you're going to use this money, the money might as well go to families. And then also, even though it's a small, relatively small amount, this could get a lot of families, kind of used to the concept of education savings accounts, which could help the state kind of push for ESAs for all, state and local funding as well.
Yeah. So just to tag on that, kind of pretty much, great minds think alike, Corey. My thought was, what if you had it, 5 times the size of the grant and 1/5 as many families? What would that do in terms of policy or in terms of governance? And I think you're right. I think if you have a larger population getting something who can then go and advocate for more later, that is a better political tactic than to have a smaller number of people who maybe get all they need, and so they're happy, and then these other people don't get anything, and so they don't. Maybe they kind of forget about it or not even involved. And so you build, you build a constituency when you have a wider, even if it's a shallower and wider program.
Yeah,
and it's just a bill too. Again, this isn't happened in Pennsylvania yet. It's just a bill, but.
And, it seems like a good idea. It moved pretty quickly on social media, at least. But that isn't going to determine what kind of votes are going to happen with this legislation, but it makes a lot of sense. And I talked to Mark LeBlond, and he had the same kind of idea, the take that you just had, that this kind of builds a constituency, even though it's a low amount, gets people kind of warmed up to the idea of education savings accounts. So this could be a longer term play here. And here's the tweet from Mark LeBlond. He's an education policy analyst at Commonwealth Foundation. He was the first person who actually told me about this. So kudos to Mark for actually kind of signaling this to me. But yeah, he has a nice thread where he goes over all of the specifics. He links to the particular bill. He links to longer term op-eds on it, longer form op-eds on it if you want to learn more about these. But it's essentially, the idea that the money should follow the child, and looks like it's either budget neutral or a savings to the taxpayer. I don't see how it could cost extra money. The money's already allocated, right? And
Mark and Commonwealth do a great job. Yeah, and it's just in a bill form. I'd love to see it move on. We want to quickly hit on a couple of charter things. Well, the first thing being kind of a little behind the scenes. I want to cover my mouth so that people won't hear clearly. Little behind the scenes action with the charter school world. Okay, everybody. Somebody got invited to the Charter School Association conference and then disinvited. Did you?
That's
Did you hear that?
crazy. Yeah, that's a couple.
That can't be true, can it, Corey? What I just said.
I think I heard something like that, where Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation for Teachers, was invited to speak at the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools conference. And I don't think there's a news article on this. This is kind of insider information. But a lot of people.
There had been an email. There was an email
that went out blast that went out to a lot of people, and a lot of people were saying, "What? Why is this a keynote speaker? The person who is calling to kind of get rid of our very existence,
or regulate you to the point where you're no different than the traditional district schools, and then you're easier at that point to unionize, and basically everything that makes charter schools unique and different and successful could be crushed by unionization and tenure and all those other things." and you're inviting this person to speak. And so much.
You know what? And I was kind of had mixed feelings about it. One, for what I just said is pretty much what I was mostly thinking. My knee-jerk reaction was, what? Like the teachers union president? On the other hand, I think they were trying to position it in a way to where, hey, maybe we could reach across the aisle and work with the other side. But it didn't seem like this was the best kind of place to do this kind of thing. If this is kind of like the National Alliance annual summit, I think it might be better for like on a debate stage or something like that. It seemed kind of strange to have the union president to be the keynote speaker.
That might be different if it was a straight up debate. That might be different, but the way it was presented, I mean, look, we can all have our own points of view, and all our viewers and everybody can have their own points of view. My view was like, this is insane. These people want you, if not dead, neutered. They want you castrated. The idea that you would do anything besides explaining how this woman's policies hurt thousands and millions of children every year, and let's not pretend there's anything but that happening, is, to me, that's where I would be coming from. I would be like,
I snagged I have an insider screenshot of a response conference that just happened today. Should I share that or no?
I don't know. It sounds scandalous. You're going to get canceled.
Well,
cancel culture.
Well, with that, the live stream that was available to the public, right? Where people were talking about the response to this.
Earlier today, Center for Education Reform, our friend Jeannie Allen had a discussion about this invitation of Randi Weingarten and de-invitation of Randi Weingarten with Dr. Steve Perry and David Hardy, both friends of mine. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So that was I think fairly public, and it happened earlier today. But
I think it's kind of small, but it says something like, the Alliance rescinded their invitation, but the question remains, why would the most vocal enemy of charter schools be invited in the first place, which is kind of what we were talking about. Did you get a chance to see this yet? I was on another call.
I did not, but I'll tell you one thing. Those two guys are awesome. Perry and Hardy, those two guests, and Jeannie Allen too. Those are some great people. So actually, I take it back. I did watch a little bit of it. I didn't watch all of it though. I just kind of checked in for a few minutes. But on the subject of charters, also there was a new book out. Dr. Thomas Sowell has a new book out, and it's called "Charter Schools and Their Enemies." I kind of wish. Yeah, there you go. That's the Amazon
#1 bestseller.
I kind of wish that maybe some of the great Kate of Choice Media had done the artwork for this book. I'm not particularly impressed by the artwork of the book cover. I will say it's not the most impressive book cover artwork I've ever seen. But that said, Thomas Sowell is somebody else who's completely... Something going on? Oh, all right. Well, I'll talk about it. So
I'm still here. Check me out. I just wanted to turn my cam off while I grabbed my copy of the book to let everybody know that it's an awesome book.
I've already read a situation underway. Okay. And so Thomas Sowell has been doing some of the interview circuit, and we have a great clip from him here.
Yeah, let's check it out. And here it is.
Traditional public schools really are a world of their own, unlike most other institutions. Most institutions, whether they're sports or medical institutions, churches, automobile dealerships, whatever, they can only survive as institutions to the extent that they can attract a clientele. Traditional public schools don't have that problem. Compulsory attendance laws automatically supply them with a clientele, whether the clientele wants to be there or not. And giving each school, its own geographic, a monopoly in its own geographic area means that they don't even have to compete among themselves. And competition is enormously important because human beings are so fallible. If you insulate people from paying the price of being wrong, you're going to get a lot of wrong things done. And in particular, you're going to get institutions being run for the benefit of those who run the institutions rather than the clientele that they're supposed to be designed for to help. In the case of the charter schools, it's like so many other businesses or institutions. They get a clientele. No one is assigned to go to a charter school because of compulsory attendance laws. Their students are all volunteers. or their parents have volunteered them. And so the charter school must produce what will keep the students coming in, or else they go out of business. And given those conditions, you attract an entirely different kind of person to the teaching profession elsewhere. In the traditional public schools, the teachers are practically impossible to fire no matter how bad they are. In the charter schools, if the teachers can't teach the kids, nobody cares how many degrees they have from what teachers college or any of that stuff.
Mark Levin looks like he was taking a little snooze there during the clip. But anyway, I still love listening to Dr. Thomas Sowell.
Thomas Sowell, he just hit 90 years of age the day that he released this book. So I want to recommend to everybody to go check it out. I want to clarify for all the listeners, because I was tweeting up a storm every day that I had a interview lined up with Thomas Sowell. Jason Bedrick from EdChoice also had a separate interview lined up with Thomas Sowell. But the day of that of our interviews, there was some technical complications, and Thomas Sowell had to reschedule interviews until and dismiss interviews until further notice. So we're staying in touch with them and hoping that everything's going okay. And I'll provide everybody with an update once we get more information. But that's for everybody asking, where's your Thomas Sowell interview? That's kind of my formal response.
Okay. All right. So one thing too, maybe this is a little out of order, but we saw a bunch of stories about how COVID in particular is driving choice. The coronavirus is driving more choices. There was a CNBC story that says just that when it comes to public versus private schools, some families may choose based on reopening plans. And this story is talking about both directions. It's talking about some people in public schools who say, wait a minute, I don't like your COVID plan. I'm going to go to a private school. And other families in private schools who say, I don't like your COVID plan. I'm going to go back to the public school where I live. I like their COVID plan better. So this concept is that COVID is now entering this long list of other reasons people pick schools: because of the academics, because of the discipline, because of the extracurriculars, because of the specialties. Now, COVID policy is yet another in a list of things like this, of COVID driving choice. And another one of those things is, Corey, you found something about North Carolina's online school applications.
Yeah, check it out. I tweeted about it, but I'll pull up the article too. But in just 4 days, one virtual school in North Carolina received 22,000 applications, which I thought was kind of strange. I think it's good that families are flocking to additional options. This happens to be a government-run option that was available to families, but there are 2 virtual charter schools in the state as well, which are capped at around 2,600 students each. And I think at one point, yes, North Carolina legislature in 2019 passed a bill that would have expanded these virtual charter school enrollment caps in 2019. The House passed it 87-26. The Senate passed it 27-15. But then Governor Roy Cooper vetoed it. And so, yeah, we're in this situation where the virtual charter schools, just because they're charter schools and they're managed by charter schools, they're capped at 2,600. Yet this other one's getting 22,000 applications, and I bet they're going to be able to take all the kids. Whereas why should there be a different rule when it comes to virtual education? Why shouldn't the virtual charters get to serve 22,000?
Parents sitting there just picking the best virtual school for their kid, or the one that the kid likes the most, or maybe these virtual schools, they have clubs, they have things that make them unique. It's not just all just learning algebra, on a computer. Like, there's all kinds of unique aspects to online learning. If a kid wants one instead of another, well, no, we're going to cap this one that we. That's not run by the government. It's anyway, that's a good point you make. Okay. And then homeschooling also is seeing its own popularity because of COVID, which
EdChoice back in April released a nationally representative survey finding, parents were 2 times as likely to have more favorable views of homeschooling as they were to have less favorable views of homeschooling. They just redid that same survey. So the previous one was in April. This one was June 12th through 15th that they administered this one. And they're finding that the split is even more favorable for homeschooling than even before if you look at the proportions that are reporting. So if you take the 50% of families said that they had a more favorable view of homeschooling in June 12th through 15th, less than half of that proportion,
I see.
21% said less favorable. So if you do the math on that, families are 2.4 times as likely to have a more favorable view of homeschooling as they are to have a less favorable view of homeschooling because of COVID-19. And I kind of commented that this is probably why the enemies of homeschooling are freaking out, because they understood that a lot of families were going to like their taste of homeschooling.
Yeah, like their taste of non-bullying, like their taste of self-paced learning, like their taste of specialty classes that they may not exist, in a regular public school. Okay. So I want to do this one quickly, but I'm calling it Antonucci Strikes Again. Okay, so Mike Antonucci, who most of us in the movement know, he studies unions and teachers unions. So he writes about what this had been a federal government program called the Paycheck Protection Program. That was something that they passed to when the virus hit. We want to try to help people not go bankrupt and give some people money. Well, they also had part of this was a small business grant that they had managed by the Small Business Administration. The program was designed to provide a direct incentive for small businesses to keep their workers on the payroll. Okay. This is a Small Business Administration grant. And they define small business, he writes, to be an expansive definition. He says it didn't take reporters long to discover that 16 billionaires received the loans, as well as other groups like the Catholic Church, even some charter schools. But then it's the last group that led to breathless stories in the New York Times and Washington Post. But both newspapers failed to notice that another group also took advantage of this government largesse, that being labor unions. So let's make this crystal clear. When the New York Times and the Washington Post found out that billionaires and some, like the Catholic Church, for example, took some of this money, they went, oh my God, hell's bells. This is chaos. This is horrible. This is the worst thing ever. Look at that. Charter schools are taking this money. We are the New York Times. We're going to call this out. But mum's the word, Antonucci says, on the fact that teachers' unions were taking this money. Oh, my gosh. And what were they taking, $10, $20, $203? No. Unions and their subsidiaries on the government's list received a minimum of $26 million and have gotten as much as $51 million. By far the largest recipients among those unions were the Michigan Education Association, that's the teachers union, and health insurance subsidiary it created, the Michigan Education Special Services Association. They received a combined minimum of $11.4 million. Now, this is a union that's already got in 2019 $49 million in dues money and had $21 million in marketable securities. Oh, I don't know whatever that means. Marketable securities. I guess maybe they're day trading. They have tens of millions more, he says, in fixed assets, etc. And they have at least 95 on the payroll that have six-figure salaries. So this is a group, the Michigan Teachers Union, and they are getting tens of millions of dollars from from this Small Business Administration loan. It says, unions in general received a minimum of $26 million, and he says as much as 51. But anyway, this one Michigan Teachers Union got at least $11 million. The point being, where's the New York Times and Washington Post on that? The answer, drumroll please, nowhere.
Nowhere yet. Hopefully that'll change. But yeah, Washington Post and New York Times both hounded charter schools for this, and I expect that we're not going to get the same kind of backlash in those.
They're getting ignored. They're ignored. That kind of thing's fine.
At least we had that news talking about it at the 74, but 74 New York Times doesn't get as much play. Not maybe we're going to read it.
Okay, and, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Let's move to the Hechinger report, because last week we talked about Andre Perry's pretty ridiculous article in the Hechinger report where he called to defund private schools and essentially accused that piece got 2 corrections already, just to remind everybody, because we went over that last week, but there was a response in Hechinger.
I think we talked too much about them because a lot of people don't know what they are, but I also wanted to talk about this, which is that maybe the pushback from mostly you, Corey, and our show and others, maybe it started to have a little effect. They actually did publish a pro-school choice opinion piece from our friend Kayla Svedlin.
Yep. So this is a mom who uses a school choice program. She's a woman of color in Arizona, and she has 4 children, and they use private school choice. I think the Education Savings Account program out there in Arizona, and she supports school choice. She was the person we were referring to when we were talking about that Twitter debate exploding on the other recent episode. It was between her, a mother who supports and benefits from school choice, debating Andre Perry, a doctor affiliated with.
That's right. We ran a clip of Kayla on this program. Yes.
And she did a really good job. And, to Hechinger's credit, they ran this piece, and the title is "When Black Parents Benefit from School Choice, It Doesn't Perpetuate Racism." And she kind of rehashed her arguments she made in the Twitter exchange, where she kind of says that she agrees with Dr. Perry that there's a lot of systemic racism in the public school system, but her main point is, well,
and why force me to go there?
Yeah, if we both agree on that, then why force me into this system that
and let me just quickly add to that. Nicole Dobo of the Hechinger Report had written on Twitter, "We are being sincere. Please submit items." Like she was saying, no, we will. Although it was quite clearly demonstrated by me and you and others that, there you go. We're being sincere. We clearly demonstrated. I made a whole little video about it to say in the past. Oh, okay, there it is. In the past, it's quite clear that this has not been a safe haven for people who defend school choice. The Hechinger Report. What Ms. Dobo wrote is, "We are being sincere. Please submit these." There's my, I'm actually moving my cursor around. And there I'm scrolling right now. I'm going through all the different anti-school choice. And so she did say we're sincere. And so apparently Kayla Svedlin did write this piece, and it looks like they have followed through. So I just wanted to be fair by pointing that out too.
Yeah, good on them for actually running it.
Okay, so now I know it's our hour, but we just got to go a little late because we have too much fun left to go.
Thing. Oh my goodness.
We have Joy Behar. And all these people. I don't know if you saw, Corey. People are like, "Why do you care what Joy Behar? Why are you even talking about what Joy Behar said? Who cares what Joy Behar?" And it's like, well, she is seen by millions of people. I think. I don't know what the ratings are for The View, but anyway, this whole thing came up. Why don't you play the clip, Corey, and then we can explain.
It's got a lot of explaining to do, but here, check it out, Joy Behar, and she's debating a little bit with Meghan McCain as well. Here it is.
You know what really is making me amusing me today is this idea that the Republican Party cares about education. They've been spending the last few decades defunding education, and they think that we're going to believe this baloney that they're throwing at us now, that they care about our children. Give me a break. Donald Trump only cares about getting reelected, full stop. And we know from John Bolton and other sources right on the front lines with him that is his ultimate goal. That's all he cares about. Please.
Well, I don't think it's fair to say Republicans don't care about children. I mean, I think that's very aggressive and incendiary.
Education.
But I think when you're education, whatever.
I said
but
education.
When I think you're talking,
excuse me.
Well, the idea that Republicans don't care about education. I mean, what about teachers' unions? One of the ideas that I've heard is teachers who are immune compromised or above a certain age should maybe be doing their classes via Zoom or via satellite, and then have a proctor who is healthy and does feel comfortable social distancing in stores. One of the things that someone like Governor DeSantis says, if we can have people at Walmart, if we can have people at theme parks, we should be able to figure out getting kids social distancing in schools. And there feels like there's a moving goalpost of priorities. But to sit here and say that Republicans don't care about education or children, it's just ridiculous.
Well, then why do they keep defunding it? Why do they keep defunding education? Every time I turn around, it's less money. I was a teacher. I know what I'm talking about. Okay, Megan?
I was not a teacher. I'm not a teacher. But again, I think that I think what's exhausting is coming on the show every day and being told that Republicans don't care about anything. We just want people to die. We want children not to be educated. Nothing matters. This is a crisis in this country right now. I have friends who have been calling me absolutely panicked about their kids not being able to go back to work and go back to school in September. And we all have to collectively come together and stop coming into this show every Monday after a break and saying, oh, it's Republicans' fault. It's not. This is America's problem.
I think Whoopi has a tiara on in that clip. Crown. something. It's too bad my bottle of rye isn't around here. I would have poured myself a drink during that clip. But
why do they keep defunding it, Bob? Why do
they're
they
defunding
keep defunding it?
No, so Corey, you are.
Around, it's less and less money.
Every time she turns around, she was a teacher. She knows. You can't argue with her.
That's the worst part of the exchange.
She's an expert on national funding levels of education because I guess 30 or 40 years ago, she was a teacher for a couple of years. So she's right?
The worst part of it, where she's appealing to authority is one thing, but if you're going to appeal to authority and be wrong, that's a completely another ball game, and you don't want to get into that territory.
Is there evidence she's wrong, Corey?
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence, and I tweeted about it like I always do. But look, here's her money quote: Republicans have been spending the last few decades defunding education. So if you go back last few decades. Each decade, we've increased education funding in the U.S. If you go back to 1960, inflation-adjusted education spending per student has increased by 280%. That's a lot. And here's the dollar amounts for each decade. If you want to say that, the 1960 is not a good decade, these are inflation-adjusted to 2018, 2019 dollars. 1970, 6,000. 1980, 8,000. 2000, 12,000. 2017, most recent school year, $15,424. Each decade it has increased. There's no way that you can say that within the last few decades we've been defunding education.
And there's a Census Bureau link too that says for the last 5 years in a row, it's gone up every year for 5 years, which I tweeted out. Which is so the point is they keep defunding it. Well,
we haven't.
There you go. We
haven't defunded it. And I mean, you can make an argument to where, the money's not making it to the classrool, but that's kind of the whole point, right? That the school choice side is saying that's a different issue. It's a different issue. And it's like, then if you pour more money.
They will often say, I have a friend and she has to buy her own, paper and her own construction paper and chalk. And they'll say that. And then you'll say, I guess so you're proving how inefficiently they spend their money, how much money's wasted on things that aren't needed. You're proving that. But their view is that if there's ever a shortage of money in one area, it's proof that the overall budget is not large enough. That's the logic.
I just want to give credit to Inez Feltscher. How do you say that? Feltscher? I just call her Inez Stetman.
Okay.
But she first called this out.
I love Inez, though.
Inez Stetman from the Independent Women's Forum she called this out in longer form before I tweeted about it. The views Joy Behar is just plain wrong about education funding cuts. So she goes over the same kind of data and points out, look, there's just no way you can say this, and that.
I have a funny story about Inez. One time I learned a card trick, and I was going around. I was showing people my card trick, like with a deck of cards, and I'd fooled everybody I'd ever shown this card trick to. And I showed it to her, and she instantly saw what I was doing and called me out on it after I was so proud of myself for my card trick. So anyway, there's my Inez story. All right, so let's wrap up. We have a couple of a couple of teachers gone wild. And so
here's one of them.
I'm a school teacher, and I have COVID.
Ouch.
Spit in man's face, according to police. Okay.
Yeah,
that's, I guess Chicago area.
I think she was charged with this, and she was mad because an elderly man, from what I remember from the article, was leaving the grocery store or whatever, and as he was leaving, he took his mask off. And from what was reported in the article was that she said she got mad about it. She turned into a Karen and said, I'm a school teacher, I have COVID, and kind of spat in his face, which you don't do that. You could be mad about something. Yeah, you don't do that. Why do we have to say these things?
Down. Don't.
But it's one thing to be upset about what someone's doing, but this is kind of ridiculous.
Okay, and we have another fun one I think on here. Teacher went berserk in frustration over flooding and pulled gun and is now facing school investigation. Berserk in frustration over flooding, huh?
There's some. I haven't seen the video, but I just saw this picture of she got a bat out.
She got a baseball bat. Yeah. Well, you want to play a little? You can play.
I think I can play it, but the thing is, look, there's ads. I'm not messing with the ads.
Never mind. I just wanted to quickly say, when we do these teachers gone wild things, it's not because we think all teachers are bad. It's not because we are claiming all teachers are crazy, all right? It's because we're saying teachers are not a monolith, okay? So that's the difference. And just to make this clear, I brought a bullhorn to make it clear so everyone would know, okay? We're not saying that we do these stories because all teachers are bad. We do these stories to show teachers are not a monolith. There are great, there are average, there are terrible. They probably shouldn't all be paid the same. These stories prove there are some really bad ones, but we're not saying they're all bad.
Okay. And that goes for all school sectors too. You know, private, charter, you know, public schools, they all have good and bad teachers. The difference is you can vote with your feet away from the bad actors, and you're less likely to have a union protecting the bad actors in the private sector too. So
yeah, I think having used the bullhorn, people might understand it this time. They might finally understand the concept that because you show bad ones, that doesn't mean you're saying they're all bad. Okay. Oh, you're getting pushed back on the Karen thing. There's probably someone named Karen. See that K there? You're Karen shaming is what you're doing.
Oh, I didn't know Karen was over the bounds.
That's a now protected class. That's the next protected class. People named Karen. Anyway, any final thoughts? Pardon?
Maybe that was her name because the first initial was K.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I think she is. She was. Yeah, you're Karen shaming. Any final parting thoughts, Melissa? Cheers to you. We got some laughter there. Corey, what bits of pearls of wisdom do you have to impart?
Man, we had a lot of stuff to cover today. I just want to say, you know, I hope more and more people figure out with this great reopening debate that parents are often getting left out of the conversation. And as Steve Hilton said, I think he has it right that you should ask for your money back. Some families are taking legal actions to get some of their money back, but another way to do that is to fight for school choice programs to where, you know, if we had school choice, we wouldn't be in this predicament in the first place. We wouldn't have to be having this conversation. We would just leave it to the individual schools to open how they want, you know, they can take care of these regional differences, and the families, if they're not, you know, comfortable going to a school that reopens in a certain way, they could vote with their feet elsewhere, use the funding for covering educational costs. So I just want to make it clear that this great reopening debate wouldn't be such a big problem if we had school choice in the first place. And maybe people will start waking up to this idea that why are we funding this system and why don't I have a say in the matter? The funding should follow the student.
I wanted to leave the viewers and listeners with the idea that you're welcome to either do one of either two things. Either write a check for $100 through the Reason Foundation or Choice Media and donate to us, or, I guess it's three things.
Retweet.
Tell a friend about this program, right? That's free. That'd be pretty easy to do. But meanwhile, also just thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it. We're trying to do something new here, and we keep growing.
And follow Bob Bowden on Twitter, @BobBowden. You can follow me too if you want, @DeAngelis Corey. But
I think everyone's already following you, Corey. Anyway, all right. So we'll see you next week.
Yep. Thank you for checking out Random Assignment. We'll see you next week on Wednesday at 5 or maybe 6 p.m. like we did today. But thanks again for watching.